Hey guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. If you guys are new here, welcome, and if you guys have already been subscribed to the channel, thank you so much for subscribing. Today is yet another dupe video for the newest ABH palette, which is the Primrose palette. Now this comes with 10 eyeshadows and 2 face powders, out of which there are 7 mattes, 1 matte with like pressed glitter in it and 4 shimmers. So I am not a big fan of the layout. I was very excited when Anastasia said that they're coming out with an eyeshadow palette, but this doesn't excite me just because this is the same color story that I already have in my collection. If you guys are a big neutral person or like a person that loves burgundy tone eyeshadows, you would absolutely have all these shades with you. And by the way, if you do own like all Anastasia palettes, you can definitely duplicate these shadows. But for today, I'm going to use KKW Beauty's Classic Blossom palette, which I recently used in my channel, and also Laura Lee Los Angeles Nudie 2 palette. And like 2 of the shades are from my Half Caked palette, which is Your Eyes Only palette, basically for this pink shade and the light shimmer shade. So yeah, so if you guys really want to see how I dupe all these shadows, then please keep on watching. Before starting, let me tell you the Anastasia's Primrose palette retails at $55. Now, let's begin. The first shade in the palette is called Rose Water, and this is defined as the metallic bright opal shade with multi-dimensional reflex, which I'm going to dupe with the shade called Set It Off, this one from the Half Caked palette. So let me swatch it for you guys. Let me swatch it here. This palette is stunning. It's so pigmented. It's so impactful on your eyes. I truly feel that this is like an amazing palette, especially if you are like a neutral lover leaning towards like pinky coppery tones. You would absolutely love that palette. I'll give you close-ups at the end of the video in the outside lighting too, so don't worry about that. The second shade in the palette is called Honey, which is defined as a matte sandy beige, and this is being duped by this shade in the Half Caked palette, and this shade is called Disc Space, and this is again a very matte beige shade. So let me swatch it. So that's how this shade is. It's a pretty basic shade, but such a necessary shade to blend out all the other shadows. So I'm very happy with that shade too. The next shade in the palette is called Sparkling Amber, which is defined as a metallic rose gold with multi-dimensional reflex. And this is more of a gold shade, and this I am going to dupe it with the shade called Sheer from Laura Lee Los Angeles palette. These shadows are stunning. By the way, I have a dedicated video using that palette already on my channel. You might not have watched it just because I might post this video before I post that video. And this is a very rose gold kind of a shade, but a beautiful smooth shimmer. Stunning shades. I am also going to do a look using these shades at the end of the video. So if you are not interested, you can skip off that. Now let's move on to the next shade. And the next shade is called Primrose, which is defined like a matte dusty rose shade with multidimensional reflex in it. And this is being duped by the shade called Tree from the KKW Classic Blossoms palette. Now in the Anastasia palette, it definitely has like specks of glitter in it, but I'm pretty sure that if you like tap off the excess, is going to be like a matte shadow. And also if you do have the shade called Ametrine from the Colourpop So Jaded palette, it is very similar to that too. It seems very boring in the KKW palette, but when you swatch it, you will exactly see that mauve shade coming through. Oh man. It looks very bland in the KKW Beauty palette, but while swatching, you can clearly see that mauve shade. Now let's move on to the next shade, and the next shade is called Mango, which I'm going to dupe it from the Laura Lee palette, and the shade name is called Bum, this one, and it is defined as a matte coral peach shade, and this exactly looks like that. So I'm going to swatch it for you guys. Look at that vibrant shade. I absolutely love that peachy shade. I actually, for the mauve shade, if you do not have that KKW Beauty palette, there's also a shade called Blushing in the Laura Lee Los Angeles, and this also have like specks of glitter in it. I don't know whether you can see it or not. this would also be a very similar shade, but this is a little more pink leaning rather than the mauve leaning shadow from the KKW Beauty palette, but still very similar. The next shadow in the palette is called Peony, which is being duped by this center shade from the Half Caked palette, and this is like a pink shimmer with gold reflex in it. I'm pretty sure that you would be having this shade if you have any of the pink eyeshadows in your collection. Even Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette also does have the similar shade. And this is how beautiful pigmentation. I mean, I absolutely love that palette. So this is the shade which dupes the shade called Peony from the palette. Now the next shadow in the palette is called Rouge, which is defined as a matte beige rosy brown shade. And this is being duped by the shade called Low Cut from Laura Lee Los Angeles palette. This shade, a stunning shade. I love to apply this shade like all over my eyelid as like a one and done eyeshadow. Love it. Look at the pigmentation. Stunning. Why am I wearing a blazer? I do not know. Absolutely stunning. The next shadow in the palette is called Fire Opal, which is defined as a metallic copper shimmer shade with like opal reflex in it. And this is being duped by the shade called Skimpy from the Laura Lee Los Angeles palette. This one. Let me swatch it for you guys. Look at that shade. Stunning. Oh, I love it. Love it so much. It's a very neutral leaning palette so far, and that's the main reason why I do not have it in my collection. I did not want to buy it. So let's move on to the next shade, which is called Deep Berry, and this is basically a matte deep berry shade. And this is actually the next two shades are from the KKW Beauty palette, and it is these two shades. So first we're gonna swatch the shade called Season, which is the deeper one, and the next one is the shade Hanami from the KKW Beauty palette, and this is duping the shade called Claret. So let me just swatch both the shades. It's a deep plum shade. Look at that. Look at the pigmentation. Stunning it is. Now let me swatch the other shade, which is called Hanami. Another fun fact is that Anastasia palette, out of the 12 shade, it seems like the 9 of the shades are like not intended for eye area. I do not know what does that even mean, but it is clearly shown on their website under the shadow description that 9 of the shades are not intended for eye area. The only shadows that are intended for eye area are like Rosewater, Primrose, Fire Opal, and Saddle, which is the face powder. So I don't know, and I do not get that. I understand if it is like a pigment warning, like a red pigment, but out of these shades, I feel like red pigment only is in this. I don't know why are the other shades like not intended for eye area. So that's another thing that I really wanted you guys to know, that the shades that I'm going to say is absolutely safe for the eyes. Now let's move on to the last two shades, which is the face powder in their palette. So the next shade in the palette is called Grape Fruit, which is defined as a matte pink coral shade. And this has been duped by the shade called Chi from the KKW Beauty palette. This one. It's a very light shade. So if you are more on the fair light shade, this would be like a beautiful blush on you. Let me swatch it here. If you can see that, this would be like a beautiful blush on you. But I feel like this one and this one, it's definitely different, but it is close enough for putting that as like a blush shade. You understand what I'm saying? They could have easily put like a 14 pan eyeshadow palette. Anyways, so that dupes the shade called Grape Fruit from the palette. And the next shade in the palette is called Saddle, which is more like a bronzer or a terracotta blush kind of a shade. And this is being duped by the shade called Patootie from the Laura Lee Los Angeles palette. So let me just swatch that too. I would probably use that like a bronzer shade. So that's how that looks. So this is like the entire palette swatched. And I'll give you close-ups of everything too. But this is how the Anastasia palette will look. If you do have these shades already in your collection, you absolutely do not need it. And for $55, I really think you do not need it. I personally am a big fan of Anastasia palettes, but this did not jump out to me, and especially this holiday season when so much of palettes are coming in the market. I would literally pick and choose the things that I do not have in my collection. So that's the only reason why I really wanted to do this video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed these dupes that I created for you guys with the palettes I already had in my collection. Now, if you guys are interested, let's move on to the eye look. So that's how the eyes are looking so far. I went pretty dramatic on the eyes. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial and you loved the way I used mostly all the shadows on my eyes today. And if you did like this video, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.